Just two conscious guys talking, where conscious male leaders come together and have a discussion that is deep, that is nourishing, that allows us to see the illumination of consciousness that's unfolding progressively for men that are waking up in the world, and where you can get insights on your own awakening as a man, and also for amazing women that want to learn more about men's challenges and struggles that have created some of the dysfunction we've seen within men in its society, often called, quote unquote, the patriarchy and other terms. What created it? What is the genesis of it all? What can we do about it today to empower men to be all that they're meant to be and to support the awakening of consciousness for men and women and all?
Here we are, Dr. Greg. How are you today?
I'm doing great, sir. How are you?
I've been better, like I said. Who knows what I've been hit with this week, but got hit with the big feet, like the so-called big fever. It wasn't that big, but it felt big. Got hit with a fever early in the week. The temperature is still elevated, but yeah, so I've been tired. I get bursts of energy where I'm like, all right, let's get stuff done. Let's go. And I'm like, oh, I'm so tired.
Right.
One of
It's
those
almost
type
like
of
that.
weeks.
The energy wind gets knocked out of you.
Yeah.
For sure. Yep.
So it's definitely getting better, and I really appreciate that. I'm not it's not fun for me to be down and out like at all. It isn't for most of us, but not like I'm like, yay, I get to lay around. Like I just, I don't know. I try to embrace it, but I prefer to be on the move.
Yeah, understandable, right? Forced recovery time.
Yeah. So I'm grateful that we've met, and you're doing all kinds of cool work. You're doctor. I mean, you're doing your adjunct professor, your telemedicine, you're like, I don't know, you got counseling, coaching, consulting, you do all this thing. You've been a pastor, you've got all this background, all kinds of stuff. And so you've accumulated a lot of different wisdom and knowledge, over the years. And so, yeah. Then again, you're just another guy, right?
Yeah, proven by my own failures and weaknesses and experiences. I'm absolutely just another guy. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like this week, like I think I broke down because I got probably, like, I don't know, but like it's just like guesses, but like I was pushing, I'm like gotta keep on it, without all the things, not just work, but like outside of work. Gotta keep going, just keep going, go, if anything, go harder. And like, and so just go. And then I don't know all what hit me, but there were certain triggers that got hit, and then I was having a meltdown the end of last week a little bit. And then I just had this undertone of anger around some stuff that came up. And then I tried to address it to a degree, but like it's sometimes it's simmering there still. And then the next thing you know, I'm like, oh, got a fever, and then it's funny because then I feel like, oh my God, now I got this. What a dunce I am. Look what I've done to my now the mind wants to go to the other idea. Like you would have been stupid to be lazy, but now you're stupid because you're pushing too hard.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, this is for women too that feel that these kind of ways, but for guys, like, I am in our family, I'm the one making the money, so to speak. And my wife does many amazing things. And so I feel like, wow, like I'm kind of letting people down. I'm not as available now for things overall. And although I have enjoyed just saying, hey, you got to take care of me. Like I have used that card a bit. Absolutely.
And did she oblige you?
Yeah, she's done pretty well. I mean, she's not one of those like whatever you need, like, but
Right.
she is very nice. But I mean,
Right.
like, she's like, you can get it yourself. Like, she's a little bit more on that level. Like, but yeah, like today I was like, could you just get me some protein for my salad? And she's
Right.
like, all right. Because I just was so tired. And so she did. And I think that's important, that we get vulnerable in so many ways. Like I did make some mistakes like last week that I generally, when I look back, I feel kind of embarrassed about it, right? So I'm just like, it's okay. It's just your ego took over for a little while there. It's all right. It's all right. And just sit and then you just, be okay with it. Just come to peace with it. We're all gonna take the banana peel or whatever, slip on it, and gonna happen. And new things emerge. I'm looking at it like this time, like a time where I can um, find a deeper ground inside of myself, and um, so yeah, but yeah, I have been asking for more help from her, and um, like I was supposed to do some things tomorrow, and I'm like, it ain't gonna happen, and I'm like, she's like, well, maybe I could help. Yeah, I've got her to at least maybe I could help out. So I'm
Right,
like, okay,
right,
cool.
right.
So yeah, just asking for more help. But you talk about, you talk about, dealing with these negative emotions and whatnot. So I had a bunch of negative emotions, and I know techniques and I know stuff, and I don't even know how many of them I use. I use some of it, but it probably could have used more attention than I gave it, I guess. It's always a retrospect. I could have done better. But
Right.
so when you get things coming up like I did, and look what happened this is minor, right? Compared to people get cancer or heart attacks or all the things guys run into, they become suicidal. I mean, like it happens. I've been there many times with that idea of it, just the idea of it, like, oh, I don't want to be around anymore. I'm done. Like many, many times throughout my life, really. So how do you help? I do want to get right into that because I want to ask you how you help people through that.
Yeah.
Because I know you help people with that. So may as well go get right into that.
Yeah. So, as far as like what I found in my own life, and as far as the framing that I think is, I'm sure other, counselors, therapists use this, but it's, first of all, it's recognizing that, everything we do, like small and large, is actually trying to achieve an emotional goal. So the goal is not actually to, get a task done, achieve a degree or anything. It's actually all about an emotional goal. The emotional goal is having more to do with, there's a micro emotional goal, which is the here and now, like I'm thirsty or, I'm tired, versus actually the macro emotional goals have to do with our quality of life, standard of living, living out, our value sets. And basically we want to experience an emotion. Like I want to feel like I'm a good dad. I want to feel like I'm successful and significant. And so everything we do is trying to achieve that emotional goal. And when that goal gets blocked, right? So if it's, we want to work and it's getting blocked, we get angry. And that blockage could happen like by being sick, or there's another human being that might be blocking the goal. But like in your case of being sick, you want to achieve that emotional goal of being successful. But the other piece is not only that there's goal and path, and the path are our actions and behaviors. It's the recognition that there are always more than one goal that needs to be achieved in any given moment. So yes, you have the goal of having to do things and work provide for your family, but also it's achieving the other emotional goal of you need rest, right? And when we try and we don't achieve a very legitimate goal, it's going to have consequences. So it's either we are striving for a goal, it gets blocked and we get angry, or there are consequences coming out of another emotional goal we're trying to achieve, but we're not paying attention to it, right? I want to feel like I'm a good husband, and my wife wants to feel loved, right? So if that goal is not being also achieved, then it's going to cause issues. So emotional goals and paths, which are behaviors, but also there's always more than one goal. And that playing that out and applying that, day to day with clients is helping them differentiate, is helpful, because then they understand like it's actually an emotional experience that we're all going for at any given moment in time, right?
Right. Well, okay. So, but somebody might say, but you don't understand. I won't be able to make payroll if I don't get this done by the end of the week. Now I get what you're saying. Like I can break it down too, right? Like, okay, but ultimately there's emotions about that and blah, 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 right? But some people, it gets so real to them. No, no, I am like the people that get suicidal. No, I am objectively a failure. It's not, I could say it's just emotional, but it's true. And I'm sure you've seen all kinds of people over the years. How about the tough? I want to get right to the tough cases. Like people
Yeah.
are, oh, no, I'm just no good or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the other piece. So as far as like feeling the emotion, like anger, first of all, I say that these are, there's good emotions, which is our quality of life, dopamine experiences, but there's negative emotions, and the negative emotions are not bad emotions. So it's not good versus bad. It's good versus negative. And the negative emotions are there, and they're absolutely legitimate because it's real, right? It's based in reality and it's true. And negative emotions are just simply the negative energy produced to solve a problem. Like I have to make payroll. So the issue is not in the emotion itself per se. It's what I find is the issues come in is when there's too much of either. There's too much good emotion that we're spending like kids too much time on video games or whatever. And there's too much negative emotion that that like a scale 1 to 10, that the issue is that it's honestly like a 1 or a 2, like it'll get solved or whatever, but it gets inflated to like an 8. So it's not the emotion itself. The issue comes in when it gets inflated. Right. So yes, it's a very legitimate thing. So then I talk about fear versus worry. And so fear is like both of them actually is something coming in our direction that we don't want to have happen. Right. But the key is that it has to do with probability. So the probability of this coming true, if it's high enough, it's actually a fear. Right. So no, this is legitimate. So we have to burn that negative energy to create a strategy to keep it from happening. But so many times, speaking of inflation, it's the probability of that fear coming true is so low. I call it a worry. That's actually a lie. Like I'll never get a job. Right. So it's the probability of you never getting a job is so low. But when our frontal lobe says, I'll never get a job, our mental model just obeys. It doesn't debate it. Then it produces a whole lot of negative emotional energy that we just carry because you can't solve the lie, right? So that's what I find is the issue. Very legitimate, but it's what makes it an issue is honestly we believe lies, or it's the inflation of it, or the amount of emotional energy that we carry. That's actually becomes the issue.
Yeah, I mean, because that's what somebody who's in a really desperate state does, is they say, no, all this stuff, because there is taking a negative emotion and saying like, they identify that they are that emotion, I am worthless, so when you get to, like I'm going to come back to this again, like when people get to that level, what's the process you take them through to help them to work through that? I mean,
right. So I'd say that the inflation is caused by 3 things. The most common one, like day to day, is some type of lie, and the way our opinion or our interpretation that we believe about, like I'm worthless, right? So what I have people do, like the first thing, like session 1, their homework is in between session 1 and 2, is I call it sentence dumping. So normally there's a topic. It could be job, marriage, whatever. That go home and open up your laptop, have a Word document, and if you pick a topic, then I say any sentence that your mental model throws into your frontal lobe about that topic, which is your mental model just throwing out these interpretations. Don't analyze it. Just do a sentence dump. Write down every single sentence that comes to your mind, right? So and actually just by doing that until they get to the point of, well, there's nothing else. That's great, because now just getting it dumped just releases so much emotional energy. Then go back to the top and make sure that every sentence is accurate and true. There might be an exaggeration. Let's say, for instance, I'll never get a job. So that's a lie, but the answer is to replace it with, let's say, 2 or 3 sentences that are true. Like, I really didn't try a lot. I should have tried harder in high school and college. And honestly, the only jobs that I'm really qualified for are ones that are low paying and that I don't want. And that's truth. I need to own that. And that's the key thing, is I need to own it. But you add to it, which is also true, if I work really hard, either go back to college or, start a business, work a couple jobs, or learn a trade, I will eventually get there. So those are all sentences of truth, right? So the goal is not to have all positive sentences. Like I could say I'm the greatest golfer in the face of the world. It's not true, right? The goal is to have true sentences, because it's like the whole truth shall set you free. And once it's true, now we can respond to it. So first, like, do the sentence dump. And then secondly is replace all those untruths or those lies with truths. And then we come up with an action plan, because now we have the right amount of negative emotion.
Yeah, I don't know if I've heard that one before, this exercise before or not. It's good. I like that because yeah, you're really taking a look at it rather than, because a lot of people teach just put a positive spin on it. Like, you didn't fail in high school. No, you were brilliant. You did brilliantly. Like,
they just didn't recognize your brilliance. They didn't recognize your genius, right? Which honestly, right, so right there brings up.
I was an idiot in high school.
Yeah, and like I own it, right? So it brings up another key point to all this negative emotion stuff that, with, I say, like, emotion is energy, number 2, but that all negative emotions exposing something in me. So a key thing I try to equip clients to do is, when we have negative emotion, again, it's very human of us to process and focus on and burn all of our energy on the thing that caused the negative emotion. Let's say, teachers or a spouse, but that means, though, if you stay there and you're burning energy on how somebody hurt you or offended you, that means you're by definition saying that the solution to your negative emotions is them changing or doing something different. And that's dangerous, right? So by saying all negative emotions exposing something in me, you then go inward and say, okay, so they did whatever, but why is what they did such a triggering point for me? What is it telling me about me? And when you start unpacking, like, again, the insecurities, the fears, the worries, the anger, like, why am I angry? When you start unpacking that, you realize that, again, there's a lot of lies in there, but also that you take the power back, because most of it, it's not that big of a deal. I should have, or I use the phrase, I tell clients, look, always say to yourself, nothing bothers me unless it should. So instead of like having all this emotional energy and trying to pull it back, try and begin with nothing bothers me at 0. And then unless it should bother me, means I do need to act. It's a lot easier adding negative energy than it is to pull it back. Right. So it's that turning it inward that, they didn't recognize the genius in me. Well, so it's their fault. I can't get a job today. Okay. Well, that means, so is the recognition of other people seeing me as a genius my answer, my solution? Of course it's not. Right. It's taking the power away from the environment and giving it back to self. Right. And that's where it enables and equips people to, reclaim that power, right? Unlock the inner strength of your negative emotions, kind of thing. Because those negative emotions are real, but you own them. Right. Right. And that's what has to be addressed.
So give me another example of how to own the negative emotion.
So I use, so on the first emotion, is insecurity, right? So that's the one that we all feel. So I use the example of, when I was a kid. I grew up in Michigan. When I was a kid, I worked at a hamburger joint. We were all friends there. And of course, we're teenagers. We all trash talk each other. But I took it to a whole new level one time. And I teased this gal, and she was a friend of mine. I teased her so bad she cried, right? But as she's walking away from me, I yell out, "You wouldn't get so ticked off if it wasn't true." Right. But right there is like this defining. I was 14. So I immediately thought to myself, like, it was an epiphany, like, oh my gosh, Greg. So every time and that's our inner, every time someone trash talks you, cuts you down, rips, it's the only way for that trash talking to work is if there's truth to it. Right. If they really want, like, because that means they're exposing. So if I said to you, Daniel, I'm glad we're meeting today because, your wife called me and she said, hey, can you talk to him about his heroin addiction? Right. So it's like, if it's crazy, it's not going to trigger you.
Right,
But if I
right,
start saying some other things, which I won't, right?
right.
Right. Then it's when I get insecure. What does that mean? It's
Mm,
true. It's exposing something. It's shining
yeah,
a light on something I don't like about myself.
right,
And I don't like that light being shined on me. But
right.
what do? I burn all my energy on the thing or the person who shined the light or exposed it. And I
Yeah.
start attacking them. But that's not the answer. The answer is it's true.
Hmm.
So if it wasn't true, then they wouldn't have any material.
Yeah.
So I need to own it. And if I just said, like when I worked with some teenagers, and the girl said to me, Dr. Greg, your hair's thinning, you have a dad bod, your nose is huge, and you're so ADHD extra. And to illustrate, I just said right back to them, I said, girls, everything you said is 100% true. I own it. Now what? And
Yeah.
they were
Now
so
what do you
tough. They
All
just
right,
said,
where do
well,
we go? Yeah.
so that's a perfect example of taking the ownership back instead of me getting so angry and burning energy on
Right,
them that
right,
exposed it. Right.
right,
I said I owned it. It's
right,
exposed in me. It's my issue.
right.
And one more, it's like I told this one gal, it's like she was upset that she was called a name by another gal. It was, the B word. And I said, the issue isn't that she called you a B. The issue is you agree with her and you didn't want it pointed out.
Hmm.
See? So the issue is that we agree, but we just don't want it exposed. All right.
Hmm.
But
Right,
if somebody says that, then you're right. Sometimes I can be right. And I'm sorry. Then we own it and then it's over. No power, emotion gone. It's
right,
amazing how quickly it works,
right. Exactly. Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, like a triggering word for me is someone saying you're kind of nerdy or you're a nerd or whatever, and that'd be a triggering word for me. And maybe it could still be, at some point, but increasingly, I tend to just go with it. I'm like, yeah, I am nerdy in my own way, absolutely, or whatever. Like, okay, as
So,
because
so like for instance, like
I
what bad happens or what, like I'd say like, well,
yeah,
Daniel, the issue isn't that what they think of you. The issue is what
right,
you think of you. Right.
right,
So
exactly,
like there's something you're assigning
right,
something demeaning or negative to being
right,
nerdy. So,
right,
so what would that be? What is it like real life
right.
counseling here? Like, what is it? What is it exposing you in the sense of why is being nerdy bad? What does that mean about you? Does it decrease your significance? Does it make you less powerful? Because it's something along those lines why we don't like being called it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. There's all these different associations, right? Like,
Yep.
even
Mm-hmm.
though like big hulking guys could be called nerds too, big time. I mean, but like one of them could be like, yeah, because I conflate it with like other things people have said, like, oh, like I'll be like I always would say like this doesn't happen anymore because I think it shifted my energy and then people don't say it so much anymore. But I remember like I just carrying things like there's something about people perceiving me as just a gentle, nice guy, nerdy guy or whatever, and then I'll be picking something up that's just a little heavy. It's not even that heavy. Like, are you okay? Oh my God, how are you? I'm like, this literally isn't heavy to me. Like, I don't know. What do you think? Wind's gonna fly me away? That I'm not that insignificant. I'm not, insubstantial. Like all my life, that's been true until recently. I don't really get those comments, but growing up, it was that way a lot
Yep.
of times. Well, this kid, whatever. And all of a sudden they start mixing it up with me in different ways. They're like, where's all this strength come from? Or what, they have no clue. And so like that would be one crazy association I put on it.
Yep.
And then
Yeah.
just the idea, Revenge of the Nerds movies, we're just
Yep. Yep.
laughing stocks, and like all you like, I'm in this category where I'm just a laughing stock in a horrible way. But like, my wife was like, no, it's a positive thing. It's because you're smart, you're different, and you're quirky or whatever.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, but I still don't like the word. It's how it was the first.
Right. Right. So that honestly, so that leads into all right. So I talk about like the emotional daily management kind of on the surface, the feelings we have in the micro insecurity through depression. But I say in the basement, underneath all that is the machine of identity, value, and worth, right?
Mhm.
So identity is just facts about ourselves. Okay. But like you just laid out all the facts about yourself, right? That are true, that you actually, here's taking power back. Initially, as we grow up as kids, our value and worth comes from, other people's, pursuit of us or validation of us, their opinions of us. So and this is every human being ever. But eventually, I say as adults, we remove every other human being from that formula of value and worth. So here are the facts about me. So if I was to ask you, what's your identity? And eventually you're like, well, this is who I am, right? And you start listing facts about yourself, which is fine, right? But you emotionally assign a value and worth to each fact, right? So, well, I simply say, does this fact about you increase your value and worth? Does it impact or decrease? Now, in a lot of ways, it's, again, negative emotion. It's good because I have a bachelor's degree, fact about myself. Well, it's negative. I mean, it decreases my value and worth. Why? Because I want a master's. Okay, perfect amount of negative energy, because you use that energy to get a master's, because you choose the facts about yourself and you choose your value and worth. Now, there's other aspects like, I have a heritage of having a rather large nose. So if I say that decreases my value and worth, but I can't change it. So the issue is that my interpretation of the fact needs to change. Like when the girls said, you're so ADHD extra, when they first said that, I was like, I have no idea what that means, but it sounds like a compliment. So thank you. Right. But I know what they mean, right? That I'm squirrel, I'm spastic, right? So that's the key. It's like whatever the facts are about you, you assign the value and worth, and then you get to determine the strategy for improving the areas that change the facts about you, like that you can change, like bachelor's degree to getting a master's degree or something. But when we say we take things personally, like, again, insecurity is almost like the gateway to our identity and worth. It's like in a house, it's the doorway, let's say in the kitchen, where that leads down into the basement of identity, value, and worth. So it begins with insecurity. These upper emotions all kind of expose something that's deeper, or it may, like identity, value, and worth, or over here in the cellar, the dark cellar is trauma. Right. So it's either big T trauma or little t, and little t trauma is simply just kind of really negative events we go through that kind of leaves a mark. Right. So whenever we experience surface emotions of events and our mental model goes, oh yeah, they think you're a nerd, or our mental model goes, oh my gosh, this reminds me of when you were 8 and that traumatic event. So that our mental model is doing its job. So we have to go down into the basement and we got to do some serious work and healing in order to kind of but then all negative emotion is exposing something in me. So whether it be the surface stuff or the exposure actually goes deeper, right? That's what we have to kind of really, but that's a gateway. But once we deal with this stuff, instead of just having less negative emotions, when we deal with this stuff, that's where we arrive at rest and peace, because I'm at peace with who I am. And I'm healed from the trauma, because what does everybody say when they're healed? I'm stronger now than I've ever been. I would not wish that, whatever it was, on anybody, but I'm stronger than I've ever been, because they reclaimed what they lost in that trauma. And there's a lot of therapy in that, but that's my point, is the negative emotions exposes. And don't see it as exposure of shame and guilt and all that. Just see it as a gateway. It's a doorway to figure out a growth area that you have control over. So it's so powerful of helping clients, like, not just get rid of the negative emotions. It is becoming stronger emotionally, more resilient, right? And more in control. So the environment doesn't impact me at all. I don't care, right? It doesn't matter, because if what they're saying is true, I've already thought of it and I already have a plan for improving it. It's really, really empowering, right?
Right. Yeah, I'm thinking about when this is going to drop and everything on the podcast, and which will probably be post election time, and who knows what'll be going on, but some of half the people in the U.S. will be hysterical, whoever wins the election.
Right.
And so, yeah, I've always recognized, like, if you're triggered by one of the candidates, you could logically say, but they are liars, but they are corrupt, but they are this, but they are that. But the
Yeah.
funny thing is, they don't trigger everybody. Like Kamala doesn't trigger everybody. Trump doesn't trigger everybody. I mean, there's a reason or something, deeper down inside in your past is why that person is triggering you so much. It's something I've, talked about in the past and have recognized, throughout all this crazy stuff of the politics. It's like, okay, what's really going on?
Yep.
At an asshole, or
Right.
show up that way anyway. What's the real thing? What's really triggering you here, and really getting to that. Not because then you're going to love that candidate and change your mind, but because you want to get out of that, because it doesn't do you any good to hang on to being traumatized and triggered and angry.
Yep.
It doesn't. People think maybe it does. Like, no, like you said, in some ways, maybe like, okay, this negative emotion or use it to achieve and whatnot. But most people, like politics, especially, they mostly just sit in it and just complain and whine about it, right? So it's like, okay, how can you translate that into a healing, and then also
Yep.
maybe some positive actions you could take for your life and maybe in the bigger picture. But
Right.
why are you being so triggered right now? Really, to look at it deeper. Yeah.
Right. And the one I didn't mention, which ties in the election is like, so there's insecurity and then anxiety. Well, you want to talk about the predominant emotion that people feel. So I like breaking anxiety down because the difference, like, because I said when number two is to have the right amount of emotion, but the right brand or type, because a lot of times people say they have anxiety, but upon further examination, it's not anxiety, it's stress, because there's a control column and a no control column. And if the item that I am having this emotion about, I have control over, then it's technically stress. So you burn energy just to execute it. But that's what I'm saying. Even the word is important, because when our frontal lobe says, I have anxiety, our mental model just responds. It doesn't debate. So what happens when we say we have anxiety? It's the amygdala. It's fight, flight, or freeze. But if we say I have stress, then our mental model's response is different. But when people, because anxiety is in the no control column. So anxiety is trying to control what we can't control, right? So I say, okay, when you have anxiety, it's based in a threat, no control. So like the election, like, okay, so what is the actual threat here? So to get control over it, it's define the threat, because our brains are mechanical. It's made that way. So there has to be a threat. And if there's not a threat, then that means you're believing a lie. So once you define the threat, like the threat is, right, then we shoot it up to fear and worry again. Because once the threat is defined, okay, so what? That means it's a fear or worry. Something's coming that I don't want to have happen. Right. So even anxiety is so predominant, but it's, okay, then what's the actual threat?
And I would jump in here to say there are things that negatively could happen from this election, right? Like
absolutely.
Now we're definitely not going to get what we want for women with pro-choice or whatever the issues are, right? Okay, that's out the window now, or it's not going to be the way we would prefer it, or whatever. Or it's just something happens, like someone kills your child or something.
Right.
Okay, I just need to deal with my triggers. I should be okay with it.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Those are different levels, right? So like, how do you handle when it's something that
is real?
Yeah. Where it's more of a real, rather than just, man, you're just hyping this thing up and it's just this old trauma, really. Yeah.
Right. And for sure. And based upon everybody's own, it's really about values and beliefs and such, right? And the threat is that there's our values and beliefs are going to impact us in some way. So that's legitimate, right? So again, it's still about fear versus worry. So if this person gets elected, then what's the threat? So it turns into, like fear, worry. Like, I wish people would just apply that. Like, really, is that a worry or a fear? Like, what's the probability of that actually happening? Okay. And if we're honest with ourselves, that's why I say I use the paradigm of rational, healthy, wise, and right. So if we have an emotional goal, our path that we choose of response, is it rational, healthy, wise, and right? So simply, if I have stress, but I use alcohol to have a different emotion, it's not healthy. Same thing here. So if it's a fear or worry, let's just say it's a fear, there's something legitimate, then what's my strategy to keep it from happening, right? Because it's in the no control column. Or what can I do to influence? So, okay, so based upon the degree of the fear, what's my strategy of response? So still, it's a strategy of response, meaning that, yes, this could happen. I mean, you voted, right? So now what? Now coming down to you personally, because that's the control column, because really it's more about the actual bad, like what's the worst that can happen or bad happens to me. A lot of this stuff, my life does not change at all. Now, like let's say the higher prices or lower prices, yes. Right. So then what do I do? Because if prices increase, I can still have a strategy of response because there's so much in this world we don't have control over, but we have control over our response. Right. So yes, it's not ideal, but I don't have any control over the, let's say, increases in prices, or I don't have any control over, let's say, the women's rights thing, but I can respond to it. So how on a scale of 1 to 10, how impactful, how big of a deal is it to me?
Yeah.
Right. And then what's my rational, healthy, wise, and right response to it or solution to it? And it's all about burning energy on that response, right? Or strategy. That's what we must do. But if I'm still carrying this emotion, then, but I've done everything I can, but I'm still carrying a lot of negative emotion, then by definition, it's either you're believing something, some worry, right? And that's why I say, look, ultimately, if you believe in God, then you got to burn it in prayer. I mean, because what else? There's just way too much that we don't have control over.
Right.
And it's got to burn somewhere. Somebody's got control. Right. So, if you God believes, then you got to pray, right? Because that's the only thing you do, burn energy that way.
Right.
A lot of times the decrease in
control. Yeah. The idea like, hey, something's in control, so to speak, or it's got this or whatever. Yeah. Kind of. Yeah. It's funny. The more we lean on that, the more we've, I think, we could find that in scientific journal somewhere where people actually believe like there's a higher power guide in their life that probably tend to have, and they utilize that connection, right, in prayer or whatever. I would think like I have seen studies that show prayer is a waste of time. We scientifically debunked it. It doesn't do you any good. I always would question those studies. I would think like we could prove like people that say, everything's gonna be fine. This is all part of God's plan for me or whatever, like that they're going to have more peace of mind or whatever. They have certain results that will be different because you got a whole different frame around your life, whereas other people may be like, none of us have control. The whole life, everything's going to hell, right? Like, and hell is like nothing. We don't have that to turn to, right? So we're just going to constantly be stuck with those problems. And so yeah, I mean,
and it's funny in those studies that okay, so how much does prayer decrease negative emotion? But just the study, it's funny because I work with a lot of doctoral students, helping them in their dissertations. So we're talking about correlation. But there's one huge variable here, and that's the variable of, the degree to which prayer to your God works has the variables of the degree to which the definition of your God, like how interested is he? How is he paying attention? Is he going to get involved? Right. So, there's all kinds of religious systems out there. So, right, just does prayer work?
Prayer, when you're barely connected, you're just like, God help me, and
exactly.
you don't really believe it, right?
Exactly. And if you have a belief that God is just like, some people believe that God just kind of started the earth and it's just spinning and he's off doing something else. Well, you can pray all you want, but he's like, what? I'm not, right? He's not even involved, right? If that's your belief in your image of God, right? So it's going to be directly correlated to the God you're praying to. All right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So you've got the Christian background, and that you were a pastor, Bible-based years and everything. So we were growing up as because we talk about being guys and everything, and what it was like growing up as a guy. Where did you grow up in the country? Unless you were moving around all over the place, which where did you grow up, first of all, and what was it like growing up as a guy?
So I'll just like a quick story that I often say that just to kind of tie all this together. So I grew up in Michigan, right? I'm in Texas now, but grew up in Michigan. And so I became a Christian as a little kid, like in junior church. But my parents quit going to church, which meant I quit going. Then I did the party hardy teen years. So that's one thing I was very skilled at, right? So lots of alcohol, lots of drugs. But then I started to suffer the consequences from those years. And then I recommitted my life to Christ. And then I started attending church again. But then I felt this, the whole proverbial, I felt called into the ministry. So I spent the summer of 1993 in Guyana, South America, right? And just, did ministry down there, but then came back and went to a Bible Institute and stuff. But it was during the time when so many people had a lot of credits, but not a degree. So I got an adult program and got my degree in organizational leadership, which became the seed to my coaching and consulting. Right. But at that point, though, I didn't know. I just wanted to get a degree, and that's the degree they offered. But then here's the key. When I went to my first semester of seminary, my Master of Divinity. So I'm on my way to become, get ordained to become a pastor. But my first semester in seminary, I took philosophy of counseling. And in that class, another defining moment, I was like, this information is incredible of how I can use this stuff in ministry, but also it was exposing stuff in me. Right. So then I immediately I mapped out a dual master's. Right. So I got my MDiv in 3 years and then got ordained, but then I continued on and got my master in counseling in 3 years. Right. So it was kind of like this duality of I was a pastor and I love doing that. But also on the counseling side, it's like a lot of pastors, they can preach and teach, but they're just not skilled in the counseling skills, right? Or in the psychology of it. So I wanted to learn that. Right. So then, of course, my own life experiences, which, just as a guy, right? Yeah. Of course, I had to run all the stuff I'm learning through the system of Greg. And and then with my own struggles of, okay, I know this is a principle that say negative emotions. So man, it's really hard to apply this true principle, right? Like on the insecurity. So doing that, like I said, I would say that I learned more about theology in the counseling room, right? In the counseling with people than I did ever in seminary, because that's the whole point. That's where it's at. So as a guy, I was going through my own stuff and had a great experience in ministry. I began as a youth pastor, then associate, then became senior pastor, all at the same church for 15 years. It was a great experience. But after that, I left the church, and then all the insecurities that I've had throughout my life kind of just came to the surface. My marriage wasn't doing well, and I have an emotional affair, right? So here I am. I was a pastor and a marriage counselor, and I have an emotional affair, right? And right then is when the full exposure happened, because not only was it, I just made a mistake, I went against my identity, right? So that was hard. It was a hard period, but I in the last 10 years, I grew like crazy. But at that point, way back in 2011, it was hard.
I want to come back to that. I want to jump back from when you were growing up and everything. I mean, you talked about the party hardy and everything. I don't know if that means 80s or when it was, but the idea, back then, it's around the time I was growing up too. It's like, you're, it's one of the ways to be cool, either become a jock or a druggie or whatever. Like, that's how you get to be, worthwhile. You gotta be doing something, and so probably the jock thing alone. Some do both, double dip, not too many, but some. But yeah, so you kind of picked a lane like a lot of people do at that age. But I imagine, with what you said, like you said, ADHD and all that stuff, the wired stuff, I would think like that might have been part of what was going on, right? But also there must have been other, insecurities, other factors going on. And then I want to fast forward eventually back to that 2011, but like there's things going on with that insecurity. How do you think like all that, like how you got led into that as a guy, especially too, into, going to such excess with the partying and everything?
Yeah. I think it's based on two things. One is my temperament. So my temperament is very extroverted, very driven, but yet very like sanguine, experiential in base, plus the ADHD. So it was all about stimulation. Right. So I remember back in the day when I was in that lifestyle, that it was during the Nancy Reagan saying no to drugs. And some like counselor came to our school and made the statement of, well, the use of substances are people use substances to bury that deep emotion. I remember thinking immediately, like, what? No, I mean, I love my life. Right. I had a great childhood, had great parents. Now, my parents were part of a group of partiers, but I remember thinking, it's like, what? I have a great life. I don't do this to bury negative emotion. I mean, everybody has insecurities, but it wasn't predominant back then. So it's like, that's why I say good emotions and negative. It's people do these things either for stimulation or to cover up negative emotions for sure. But mine was definitely stimulation based. Right. Right. And it wasn't driven from like insecurities or negative emotions. It was based upon stimulation.
I'm
Now,
not
after I
blaming your
started,
parents, but if they were partiers, it was an influence probably, indirectly or directly. I mean, they're like,
yeah, for sure.
we party, right? And oh yeah.
Yeah, my parents were married and healthy, and they had all their friends were married, and they were very functional, successful, but they party. They're weekend warriors. So we loved everybody, and everybody loved us. We had a good time, but there weren't any problems caused.
Right.
None. There was, I mean,
everything
right until later when some of the stuff got exposed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for you, like it got to be very unfunctional, is what it sounds like,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, eventually just take it too far, and I got a DUI, and then I almost a year later I broke my leg riding a mini bike, and it was at that moment that I realized I had an issue and I had to change, and that's when I recommitted my life to Christ. But it culminated, as it always does, that that lifestyle's not sustainable. Eventually it will cause issues, right? But like say during the time, it wasn't driven by the negative emotions, it was just pure stimulation. But eventually it caused consequences for sure.
Interesting. Now, if we get to the emotional affair part, now, so you cleaned up your act, so to speak. It was just no. You said it was just your experience of it was just stimulation, but then it got to be too much. The drugs took over. The party took over. Led to negative consequences. You recommitted to Christ. You got cleaned up. You get in, you're a pastor, you have a great run of 15 years.
But during that time though, I'm sorry to interrupt. Ironically, that's when the insecurities started to surface as a pastor. Because, as a pastor, people, if they leave the church, right? Well, it's like, I wonder if God's mad at me too, right? So that's when the insecurities, because and the emotional affair, again, it's always about culmination. I realized my biggest complaint was, and then I can see it carry back, hindsight's 2020, going back to childhood, that my complaint was because of my temperament. Oh my gosh, like I'm frustrated because I feel like I pursue everyone else harder than they pursue me. Like, again, personality, temperament, ADHD. I want to create a powerful experience, right? Hence the partying, hence the fun. But then it wasn't returned, right? It's like nobody had a vested interest in making, my life fun. And, so I started to realize the disparity between how much I was pursuing others and then how much I wanted others to pursue me that didn't meet those expectations. And that's where the insecurity is like, why? Right. So why am I not being pursued like I'm pursuing them? Like, then what is it about me? And then with my marriage, struggling, right, which again is core. That's where at the end, of course, at some point when the marriage, after so many years, then of course somebody comes along that starts doing that validation, starts doing that pursuit. Well, there you go, right? I'm a marriage counselor, so that's how nobody sets out to have an affair. Right. It's just somebody comes along and meets those needs where there's a vacuum in their own heart or in the marriage, right? So that's when it started to get exposed, the insecurities right there,
Right. Yeah. Interesting. So the insecurities were, wow, why is it these people are leaving? What's going on? Is it something with me? Is what I'm hearing, in that, then maybe there's something about me. So the emotional affair, was that somebody that pursued you, or was it the other way around? I'm curious.
It was mutual. It was kind of like just like interest, and then friendship, engagement, and then obviously, the look or something like that. Then it just starts to spark. And just, again, those feelings. And then obviously that gal was struggling in her marriage as well. Like it was kind of like, perfect storm kind of thing. It ended after that's why we call it an emotional affair. We didn't do anything physically. It was just emotional, relational. And it, of course, after 6 months, it fizzled out. But after that, I went to see a counselor. And that's when January 31st of 2012 is when I was complaining to him. I always feel like people, I'm pursuing people harder. And I said this phrase, Daniel, like, I just want them to make my world. And when I made that statement, like, okay, whoa, right. Then I actually had this, vision from God of, God blowing away all that paradigm. And he says, I make your world. That was a defining moment that began a healing process. It was powerful that I realized that I'm basing my value and worth in other people pursuing me. And that's kind of like was the seed of identity and worth of something's off here. Like I have way too much investment in other people validating me or pursuing me in my value and worth. It wasn't healthy at all.
I bet a lot of people listening that are like entrepreneur types, business owners can experience, can feel this way, or even just on social media, right? I mean, well, some people put out a post, they get all these responses, and me, I get next to nothing compared to them, or
exactly.
Or someone just decides they're going to launch something, they make all this money for me, it's like crickets, and like nobody cares, and why is that? Is there something wrong with me, and all that stuff? And it's definitely definitely a lot of comparison definitely goes on and whatnot.
And that's why I say, like, when it comes to relationship is about safety and pursuit. And that's valid, right? So we have to be safe with each other emotionally, relationally. And then, every relationship needs pursuit. So I say it's not the definition that changes. It's not even the expectations or the standards. None of that changes, right? Because powerful relationships are still the same, right? In order to have, like with our spouses, what changes when we take that and like, I control my value and worth, what changes is the degree of impact on me emotionally if that pursuit doesn't happen. So I say, it's like, I don't need, let's say, my wife to pursue or validate me. I mean, I want her to, but I don't need her to. And that's what it's about. It's that need versus want. So the relationship standards are the same, but it's really about having to do with that. Do I need this to be emotionally okay? And we don't. We don't.
Well, if you can't control it, it's definitely something that you don't want to have as a need, right?
Exactly, which is other people, the environment. Right. If the environment triggers me, I can't control it. So I can't base my, the improvement of my emotions and put it in the environment's hands. So, I mean, all with negative emotions, good emotions, it's how do I, whether negative emotions or good emotions, pull it back and still have expectations and standards, but I control the degree of how much it impacts me. Again, that's the key. Nothing bothers me unless it should, kind of thing.
I find things work out sometimes when I just kind of like don't fight things, and I'm just like, I hope this kind of happens, but if it doesn't, it's okay. I'm pretty clear about it though. Like I really, kind of really would love for that to happen, but if that ended up, it's okay. Whatever happens is okay. That seems to be one of the easiest ways for, utilizing this kind of way of talking about it. Like God can bless my life so easily because I'm just, oh, I hear you. Okay, sure. We can arrange that because you're not throwing around a bunch of complaints and worried about it, or attacking people saying that they're not meeting your needs all of a sudden just because I just stayed light, and I stayed with the kind of an intention, almost like sort of like an intention, I guess, law of attraction, all that. But like, it just kind of comes to you. It just kind of happens when you can stay light and easy with that. Now, not everything we can do that because we're attached to some things, right? Like, oh my, people get worried and upset about things. But if you're in a lighter way with things, then, things can change that seem like they're not going to. Like, oh, this person's always this way. Well, just keep saying that. It's the easiest way for that person always to stay that way. That's been my experience.
Yeah. Right? Absolutely. Yeah. And that's where the safety, like if I'm not safe with you, that basically every time we're together that I do something that really offends or charges you up, like I'm not safe with you because, right. It's every time it's like, I'm offending you. Now I would say that person needs to figure all this stuff out, but I'm not safe with them, so I back away.
Yeah,
Right. Because it has to be about emotional and relational safety. It's not on me to make you feel comfortable, or it's not on me to make your emotional world better. Right. Now, there's things I can do that are offensive for sure, like bullying and stuff like that. But ultimately, you have responsibility for your emotions. Again, so if I'm doing something that is wrong and offensive, then you need to make a safety and pursuit thing and pull away from me.
Yeah.
But all right.
Yeah, there's definitely issues with the safety stuff. I can experience that in my marriage or even with clients sometimes I work really closely with. And, if there is something that comes up and all of a sudden, somebody doesn't feel safe, they shut down, right? They're going to shut down. I don't feel safe, especially in a marriage. Okay. We have to build up the trust. And like literally spouses will tell you that, right? I don't trust you a lot right now. Like, we're going to have to build up that trust again before I'm able to feel safe. Right.
Sure.
And I think that's great that you said that, because some people will be like, F safety. We don't need safety. It's just about full expression. Just be how you are. And you want to curse them out, you just do it. And, all this stuff. And it's like, man, what a chaotic life. Like that word doesn't work for me. Like the bits I've gotten into, I'm like, I got righteous anger. I'm going to share it. And it only feels good for a short period of time. And then later on, for me, even usually almost every time I feel bad about it later. I'm like, why was I such an ass?
Right.
I didn't have to be like that about it. Like,
and that's the issue. Like with my wife, if she does something to upset me, and let's say it's legitimate, she did something wrong to upset me. But the degree of, let's say, consequence or offense is like a 2, but I come at her with an 8 because I'm, baggage or whatever. That's why it causes damage. So that's why I say with couples, like, we got to stop causing further damage, because no, she deserves the 2 or the 3. And if that causes negative emotion in her, that's on her, because it's legitimate, because it's a 2 or 3 level of issue. But if I come at her with an 8, she doesn't deserve those extra 5 or 6 points, right? Right. So that's what causes the damage, that now my emotional intensity becomes the focus, not where she might have hurt me. Right.
Yeah, we definitely take things out on people, right? We got a lot going on. All of a sudden we're like, yeah, this 2 looks like a 20 to me right now. How dare you ask me to wash the dishes? Outside, you're off the ledge, so yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a whole I think, I don't know, for me as a guy, I know, like, in a relationship, like sometimes tension will build up. Like there's something gnawing at you that's going on. And if you don't, it's one of those things, if you don't communicate about it and bring it up, then all of a sudden you're like, well, I've been being a good soldier, but not today. Right. And then that's where the big blow ups happen. But that's why it'd be better just maybe there's a little bit of upset if you bring it up earlier, but it's better than blowing your stack later. Right. So yeah, I think the communication is just huge. And even if, like, your spouse doesn't respond, like when you're saying, like, well, I can't control, and your wife can't control it either, I don't think. I mean, she can't control it. She can try to participate in this regard, but like when your emotional needs aren't being met, you know, she may feel like she's doing all she knows. I hear from people all the time. My girlfriend or my, spouse, like, they don't want whatever. They don't want sex as much with me as I want sex, or whatever it is, right? And there's this imbalance, but they're just being them. It's not like they're not, like, they're trying to not be interested. They don't care about them. It's just they're just being them, in every case. Like, they're just kind of being themselves at this, or at least at this moment, right? And they just don't know how to be different. They're not, maybe it's not meant, they're not meant to be different, right? Depends on what it is, I suppose. But it's a matter of acceptance. And I find, like, in marriages, like, sometimes a lot of it's a journey of acceptance, rather than, that's where so many divorces happen, right? Like, I will not accept this about you, and I gotta have that in my marriage, and and I personally, I don't know, I'm a kind of an anti-divorce guy. To be
Yeah, of course.
honest.
Yeah.
I mean, but I'm like, yeah, I mean, I always feel like it could almost always be worked out personally, but I don't want to judge people that make that choice either, and I don't. But I'm just saying, like, I just feel like there's always a way, but people set up these walls, like you come across this line, that's it. And,
Yeah. It's for
up.
sure that kind of a both end where people, they don't have the skills or emotional resources after whatever. I do believe too that yes, it can be worked out, because if we already are aligned on our values and convictions and beliefs, then, I call it a spectrum of importance where there's opinions, preferences, wants, desires. And like when a young couple moves in together and I say, well, why don't you just get married? Then they say, well, we want to make sure we're compatible. I'm like, well, if you're compatible, if you're already discussed these heavier topics already, I said, I always like asking them. So what do you think you'll discover about the other person by living together? Right. Would be a deal breaker, because you already discussed the heavier, weightier issues, right? Yeah. So the reason why your relationship would break down and fall apart now, it's selfishness and immaturity. Has to do with the dirty counter or the whole proverbial, the toilet paper roll going over or under, right? Or
no, it's got to be the other way. I'll fight you all night
so
on
it's
it.
selfishness and immaturity, and we take things personally, which means what? So that's why when our spouse does something or doesn't do something, doesn't meet our expectations, let's say, we take it personally, like, oh, they don't love me, or they meant it. And that's where we take stuff personally, and it hits our value and worth. Then the intensity, it gets inflated, right? And we get super emotional because it's, now our emotional goals are being blocked, but our emotional goals about deeper issues of identity, value, and worth are being blocked. Now we're going to come out fighting, but it's not, right? But that's what, again, how many people like actively have removed every other person from the value and worth paradigm? Very few. That's the whole point. Like most people still have other human beings as a resource to my value and worth is tied to them validating and pursuing me.
Right.
And it's messy.
Right. Yeah. I recommend people. I tell people in newer relationships, and they're thinking about getting married, or they're doing their marriage. I'm like, just learn not to fight about stupid shit. Like that's the number one thing.
Yeah.
Like,
and which is again selfishness and immaturity. Right?
Like the big things. And like one of the things like I just started to learn not to bother with is things like the thermostat level. Like I'm in this house all day. But so is she, and honestly, it just matters to her what the temperature is more than me. I'm not gonna fight tooth and nail for it. Like, all right, I can wear a sweater. It's not a problem. I'm not. But I think when you're early on, you feel like, whoa, you're taking control of me, and all that kind of stuff, and these power struggles ensue, and it's just not worth it. It's just like, you need to learn to. They say pick your battles or whatever. There's some truth to that for sure.
Yeah.
But
and that's right. Or it's you could pick your battles, or it's might be a legitimate frustration, but again, the weight of it is only a one or two, because it's an opinion preference. And so I say basically don't bring the weight of intensity from, let's say, deal breakers and convictions and values. Don't bring that weight down on opinions, preferences, and wants or desires. It's just not that weighty, but that's what we do. Right.
Yeah. So anyway, why don't you tell people where they can learn more about you, so they can follow up if they want to?
Yeah. So my website is becomingmore.com. It's becoming more, counseling, coaching, and consulting. It's a participle of ongoing process of improving, right? So becomingmore.com. And again, counseling, coaching, consulting. I've just finished a book and should be coming out for pre-order here soon. And then it's coming out for officially in January, that I kind of unpack all this. And I have videos on the website and such. So yeah, by all means, reach out to me. Would love to connect with people, and, obviously just walk them through how to become more, for sure.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks, Dr. Greg.
Thank you,
I know
Daniel.
you got to run, but I really appreciate you coming on today. It was really awesome.
Bless you, bro. And thank you. It was great. All right. Take care.
Okay.
All right.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening in to Just Two Conscious Guys Talking, where our mission is to impact millions of men ultimately to deepen their awakening by examining their consciousness of what's been unfolding for them with male stereotypes and programming that has allowed them to have opportunities to evolve during these times. It's an exciting time to bring more love to men and women around the world, and we are grateful for you tuning in today. Feel free to share this episode and keep tuning in, and also look in the show notes for a link to get notifications of future episodes. Until the next time, everyone, goodbye for now.